I'm going to cover a few things here. I'm making notes last night thinking, like, how do you do this with COVID? And how do you leave? How do you step aside? And I'm not a good writer. And I'm thinking, you know what? And Doug, no offense, but man, the zoom angle on my face for the last 2 years has driven me crazy. So I don't want that to be like a lasting, indelible impression on anyone. And fortunately, I think we managed to come up with a good setup here, just with the space and everything that we've been through. We collectively, all of us, with COVID and managing to go about our business. Last week, I had a great visit, a tough visit, with Mickey Loomis and Mrs. Benson and Dennis Lauscha, relative to just looking ahead with what I want to do. And Mickey and I now, we're 16 years, and so I think that was challenging just because of our friendship more than our professional relationship. And then Mrs. B was awesome. You know, I love this about her. She said, well, go away for 2 or 3 months and come back in training camp and we'll be ready to go. And I thought that sounded pretty good, actually. But I'm glad that she told me to spend some time away and give this some thought, because it is a big decision, and it certainly affects a lot of people. You know, it's not often you as a coach have that opportunity to possibly leave, and it was something that certainly I hadn't really thought about over the years. You know, we coach, and at some point they tell you to leave, and as difficult as being fired is, it sure seems easier to thank everyone and move on your merry way. But this, I'll try to hit everything, and I'm going to ask or answer every question until you guys are done answering. So I'm sorry if this takes a while, but yeah, we're not in any hurry. So I like watching Netflix. I like watching TV shows. I think you guys do as well. And it's Mardi Gras season, and I'm a kind of a Ted Lasso fan. And I do have a regret. 15 seasons, 16 years here, and I've got like the best female owner in the world of sports. And you know, we don't do biscuits here in New Orleans, but we do king cake. So where's Mrs. B? I also have like 100 of them for the media and everyone else that's here to kind of celebrate the Mardi Gras season. I want to start and bounce around here, but I want to start with a series of thank yous. It's important. And so thank you, Mrs. Benson, for being no better. There could be no better owner for me to have worked for, starting with your late husband, Mr. B, Tom Benson. When I was sitting around last night thinking about how I wanted this to unfold, I Google searched Breeze, and it's like, I hate following Breeze. And he brought up some of the same stories. You know, Mr. B was always one of those guys that for every meeting I had with him, it was never football related. It was always about something other than football. And he had a dish of Tootsie Rolls and Hershey Kisses. I'd go in there, we'd talk about family, we'd talk about anything other than the Saints, and I miss him, and realize the time and the timing of me coming here back in 2006 was perfect. And obviously us having some early success worked out. But I wish he was here, and Mrs. B, you've been fantastic, carrying on everything about his legacy, and I know he would be extremely proud and is extremely proud. So he's not here right now, but he is, and so I thank the two of you for being great owners. And I mean that beyond just being owners. I thought about this. I can't think of one time the answer was no. Now, it might be like, oh, we're trying to do something and we don't have enough time to remodel. And so it might have been time driven, but the answer was never no. And look, that's easy when Mickey has the credit card and I've got the wish list. I'd like to thank Dennis Lausch, our president and a good friend, for people talk about culture and like what's the secret. Teams right now, 8 teams, 9 teams, they're all searching for the right culture. Everyone wants to know how, and it's very difficult, and yet if I was writing a book, I'd say it's also very simple. The alignment of ownership, your club president, your general manager, your head coach, right through your roster, that sounds easy. But like any Thompson, man, I thought I had a great interview, and when I landed here, it was right after Katrina in January, and many of you remember that. And I just thought, when I met Mickey, I thought, man, I like this guy. He's got a heck of a task ahead of him. And I kept looking at my flip phone at the time, waiting for that Green Bay area code to come in. And I got the message that evening that they had gone in a different direction. And I remember just throwing the phone into the pillow and thinking, holy cow. And it was the best thing that happened. And sometimes, again, you don't have any control over that. And so he trusted his gut. And beyond just hiring me, I can't think, we've had disagreements multiple times, and yet we've always been in concert. And so, like, one of my biggest, not concerns, but one of my biggest second thoughts was, man, I don't want to not be around this really, really good friend of mine. And so, God, and so that's not going to happen. I mean, I'm actually moving into another property here locally, but more than my general manager, more than the person that hired me, more than all of those things is, I would say, one of my best friends. And I appreciate that. I appreciate that. I mean, I could give you 1,000 stories that would be interesting because our personalities are so different. Like, he walks slow. It bothers me. I want him to pick it up. When you make a decision like this, you spend time with your loved ones. You spend time with your family. I've got, a daughter who's out west in media trying to become what many of you are, and a son who's in college. A wife, Skylene, who we've been together for many years, 10 years, and got married last June. And I've confided in those guys quite a bit and talked about these decisions quite a bit. And I appreciate them. And they've been extremely just good listeners, because ultimately, like, we all want happiness for our friends. We want happiness and health for our friends and family. Those are the two things I think about maybe as I've grown older. If your children are happy and healthy, then you're blessed, I think. And so I feel like there's been a very steady listening group here, and without any angle relative to, hey, what is it that you're looking for? Because honestly, as I sit here today, and this is okay, I don't know what's next. And look, I read the reports and I understand. I've not spoken to anyone from a media outlet relative to doing television or radio. Maybe that opportunity arises, but every time I read something that says, like, he's in line for this job, I'll call my agent, Don, and I'll say, Don, did you hear something? Because I've not heard anything. And that's okay. I think I'd like to do that. I think I'd be pretty good at it. But so stepping outside, like in the cold weather today, and being a little uncomfortable professionally or from a career standpoint is okay. I don't like the word retirement. Mr. B didn't like it either. He always said, retirement's overrated. We get sold this whole image of retirement by these investment groups on TV and golf courses and retirement. And so, I still have a vision for doing things in football. And I'll be honest with you, that might be coaching again at some point. I don't think it's this year. I think maybe in the future, but that's not where my heart is right now. It's not at all. I want to thank the media, and I feel this way, and I don't want you to nod your heads in agreement. You can tell me later. But when you come in as a young coach, you make a lot of mistakes. Like, because you're trying to do everything you think you need to do, and it's not until you get older and more experienced that you realize the more important things are this and not that. And hopefully, in my latter years, you guys have found me very accessible, very friendly, very open, and maybe eager to please, or at least accessible, and that's what the Jenny's Ice Cream is for every off-season and Christmas time. So, but I do appreciate your jobs, and I recognize, especially in the last 2 years, how difficult those have been. You know, people don't understand when all of a sudden you practice inside, and with the COVID restrictions, the relationships that many of you have with our players, it's hard to do those jobs effectively as you might like. I mean, when's the last time you've been able to go into a locker room after a game? And we kind of miss that, really. I do, honestly, and going into the presser after a game and looking at a laptop. And so I appreciate every one of you. I think, and I've worked in a lot of places. I've been in New York, I've been in Philadelphia, I've been in Dallas. Those are big media markets. But I appreciate the relationships and the manner in which you guys have done your jobs. And I mean that. And probably, knowing what I knew now, I probably handled my first 5, 6, 7 years differently relative to the media, where you come in and you just don't know enough yet. But thank you. And again, I'm going to see many of you for years to come. I want to thank the city and the fan base. I'm going to get into a little bit of 2006 and maybe the early journey, but I don't think any of us, when we started, certainly I didn't when I started, understood the dynamics and what took place post-Katrina with that '06 season that I thought, and I would argue, was every bit as important as any other season that we've had here, relative to where the city was, and it became much bigger than football. And I'll talk about that in a little bit, but this fan base has been amazing. And you do this and you travel to cities and you see other venues. This is by far one of the most difficult places to play, and unfortunately we didn't win enough home games this year, but man, the fans are something else. It's not a wine and cheese crowd. You know, people make decisions to buy season tickets here that goes into, their budget relative to what other things they're choosing to do. We appreciate all of that. I have a really good memory and can remember back in '06 when we drafted Reggie Bush and we drafted the rest of that class, and the excitement level. I don't have a history. I've met, now Tulane Stadium, Jeff, I'm guessing holds 70-some thousand people. I don't know. All right, but I've met 110,000 people. They told me that they were there for that game and the kick return over the years. And the passion that has been handed down generationally is unbelievable. Because when you're a young kid, you root for who your dad or mom root for. You don't know. And so the amount of stories post '09 season, where a grandparent wasn't alive to see a Super Bowl, but they were, all of that just makes what we do, fulfilling, pretty special. We're teachers, but that's unique, and I don't know that any player back then when we signed on, or any coach, myself included, knew quite actually what we were getting into, and that's the truth. So thank you, City of New Orleans, our fans. I'll be honest, when I hear the Bengals, and I'm rooting kind of for Cincinnati a little bit in the postseason, but the Houday thing that came after. I don't know if many of you remember the movie Jerry Maguire. There's a scene in that movie where Tom Cruise is in an office building. He shouts out, "Who's coming with me?" And he grabs a goldfish, and Renee Zellweger says, "I'll come." And they began a journey. And in 2006, 16 years ago, it kind of felt that way at that time. There's a special spot in my heart for the coaches, the staff, the players, everyone who came when 90% of the cars were leaving. I can remember the trip in on I-10, and there was no traffic heading south, but all of it was going north. Coaches like Pete Carmichael, Joe Vitt. Joe Vitt he was the only coach that I hired that year that had a number of other options, and he chose to come. Everyone else, every one of us that came, were all promoted and just paid better. Curtis Johnson, Greg McMahon, Gary Gibbs, I'm not going to be able to hit on every one of them, but those of you that coached in 06, I can't tell you how thankful I am, because like we actually had a rule. We came up with a rule after our first month that no one could say the K word. No one could say Katrina, because there were a lot of reasons for why we weren't going to be successful, and we tried to look past those. So to those coaches, I appreciate it. Here's what will help you be successful, Deuce. You draft Reggie Bush in the first round. He plays 10 years. You draft Roman Harper in the second round. You acquire Jeff Fain. He starts at center. Roman plays 12 or 14 years. You draft Jari Evans in the fourth round. He's going to end up in the Hall of Fame someday. And you also acquire Hollis Thomas, a nose tackle who I was with in Philadelphia. You draft Rob Ninkovich. I'm back to young and dumb here. I'm back to young and dumb. And I don't have a vision, and so we let him out of the building. He comes back in the building, and I tell him he's going to be a long snapper, and then he goes and wins 2 Super Bowls for New England. We make mistakes, but he ended up being a fantastic player. And in the 7th round, you draft a lineman out of Northwestern by the name of Zach Streif. He plays 12, 14 years. He does play-by-play just because he wants to, and then he becomes an assistant coach here. And you draft Marcus Colston with a compensatory 7. So when we talk about the quick window we all have to get started, earn credibility, get your program off the ground, it has to include the procurement of good players. It has to. And we didn't know it then, but those were the pillars, along with any free agent that came. Pierre Thomas is going to come a year later. But those were the pillars of young players that we built on. Now, mind you, we also signed in free agency Scott Fajita. He came we knew each other. Mark Semino we acquired a week before the season. Scott Shanley, Drew Brees. That's a pretty good group of free agents. We took a chance on Drew at that time because, quite honestly, we weren't going to win any jump balls. And that's the truth. Like, in other words, we had to be a little overly aggressive to win the game, if you will. The status quo or just... And so, man, it was the best chance we took. And so I thank Drew and his wife Brittany and their family. I spoke to him at length last night about this decision for the first time. And he was fantastic. And I did call him during this season, and we discussed him coming back. And I think both of us agreed, based on our lineup versus Miami, it was a good thing he stayed and didn't come. I also want to thank the players that were here, that were ready to win, and wanted to join in. Bill taught me that remove the blinders when you're evaluating these guys and understand there's going to be good football players. Deuce, we talked about it just a minute ago, John Stinchcomb. I'm not going to hit everyone. The late Will Smith, Steve Gleason, Charles Grant, Brian Young, Freddie Mack. There were a number of players on that roster that were thriving for this culture change. And therein lied a little bit training camp at Millsaps, and that was difficult. And yet, so there's elements that went into that 06 team that that were extremely important. And back to those coaches, myself as the head coach, I kind of feel like we're in this business of serving. We're teachers at heart, and we're grateful to be in this position. Quite honestly, I know for me it was play until they tell you you can't play anymore, and then it's like, well, all right, I don't want to leave though. All right, then you have to coach. And I've always felt grateful to be able to teach and be part of the locker room, even though I wasn't playing. And our roles as teachers are those of service. And so I appreciate that group of coaches and that team. And I still say to this day in 06, we've had a lot of teams, probably teams that are better than the 06 team, but none tougher than that 06 team. None tougher than that 06 team. And that leads me back to that whole city rebirth and fan base and people. That's when I grew to know, like, holy cow, this is bigger. This is bigger than any, this is more than just football. This is more than just football. I didn't know how to eat a crawfish at that time. I was kind of on the beignets, the king cakes with cream cheese, a number of things, but everyone wanted to know, hey, how do you like it here? And honestly, in your first year, when you're not from here, you're figuring it out. Here are the players that have won a Pro Bowl or been selected All-Pro in these 16 years. Teron Armstead. I want you to know this about him. If there's one thing, he is a tremendous leader and a tremendous player. Drew Brees, Jamal Brown, Jermon Bushrod, who's working with us now, tight end Jared Cook, Demario Davis. Tremendous leader. Jari Evans, Jonathan Goodwin, Jimmy Graham, J.T. Gray, Ben Grubbs, Roman Harper, Deontay Harris, Mark Ingram, Malcolm Jenkins, Cam Jordan, Alvin Kamara, Mike Carney, Marshawn Lattimore, Will Lutz, Thomas Morstead, Carl Nix, Andrews Pete, Ryan Ramczyk, Jeremy Shockey, the late Will Smith, John Stinchcomb, Michael Thomas, Jonathan Vilma, Max Unger, Larry Warford. So here's a problem. When you get married in the off season, you can't invite your team. When you get married somewhere in a different destination, you got to invite maybe your captains of your Super Bowl team, but for every one of those players that didn't get an invite, I would have. That would have been awesome. And those that did, they spent enough to make up for the rest of you. But I'm proud to have had the opportunity to work with so many great players. I'm thankful. I mentioned the '06 draft class to get to the '17 draft class. You ready? Because we need another shot in the arm here. Marshawn Lattimore, Ryan Ramczyk, Marcus Williams, Alvin Kamara, Trey Hendrickson, who's still playing, and we wish him well. It's a people business, and the thing that I'm most proud of is collectively in scouting, Jeff and your group and everyone involved in the procurement process, we've consistently found the right people that fit what we're trying to build. I'm not able to mention every player's name, but I am able to thank every player today. I can't hit on every coach. My current staff, I just, in a staff meeting, told them our record was 9-8, and we didn't get in the playoffs. We're rooting against the Rams right now because of that. But I'm proud of the job they did this year. It was extraordinary. So for every coach who's been here, every scout, every staff member, the people that take care of the facilities, the equipment guys, security, the last word I wrote down is the building. You know, and I've heard that saying, it takes a village. And honestly, it takes a building to be successful. Not in 1 year, but it takes a building to be successful year after year. And for me to have a chance to be a part of that building and in a position to coach so many of these great players and be around so many of these great people. Jay Romick, I can't hit on everyone, but man, the tireless amount of time and energy people spend, especially in the last 2 years, I thank them. I thank them. All right. That's a lot. We're going to have questions here in a minute. I don't know what's next, and it kind of feels good. The last thing I did before I went to bed, I Google searched how not to cry during a speech, and one of the items was drink water and yawn. Well, I didn't want to yawn, but it worked a little bit. So with that, I'll open the floor to questions.